Hello and good morning friends, welcome to the CEC-UGC live lecture. Dear friends, with our ongoing series on personality theories. Today also we would be discussing on one of the important theories. Dear friends, we believe that all the theories which were conducted for you in the previous lectures were beneficial for you. So moving forward, today we would be talking on Jung theory of a personality, and for this very discussion we have once again with us in our studios Dr. Parveen Sharma. Dr. Parveen Sharma is Associate Professor in Hindu College of Education, Hindu College of Education as Sonipat, and we would like to tell you all that she has authored numerous books. A number of her articles have been published in reputed journals. She has been teaching since many years, and number of students are pursuing their PhD under her able guidance. So let's welcome our guest, Dr. Parveen Sharma. Hello ma'am, welcome to the DSEC lecture.
Thank you, Geetika ji. Good morning viewers and listeners. In this session today, we will be discussing the next theory of personality given by Jung. Let us start. Carl Gustav Jung, who was a physician by profession, was born in 1875 in a Swiss village, Caswell. He was a close associate of Simon Freud. Adler and Jung, both the psychologists, were close associates of Freud, but later on some differences on the ideology arose, but earlier Jung was so close and so dear to Freud that Freud named him as beloved son and a crown prince. But later on the ideology, especially the views which were given by Freud on the content or on the aspect of sexuality, Jung were and Adler both were not agreeing to it. So the ideologies and the differences came to such an extent that Jung established a separate school of psychology which was named as analytical school of psychology. Whereas Adler talked about status seeking and Freud talked about sex only and sex gratification, but the great psychologist Carl Gustav Jung stepped ahead and he talked about the other things. He gave the examples that history is full of such examples. There is no dearth of the examples of such personalities in the history when the people were fully satisfied sexually and they were having good status, they were occupying the good status, good chair, high prestigious job. Still they were in search of something else. What was that? That was in search of peace and the inner peace and true love, and Lord Buddha is the greatest example of this. So further he talks about that the real aim of life is the self-actualization, self-realization. Of course, he doesn't deny the importance of sex which was highlighted or which was emphasized by Freud, or the status seeking which was emphasized, which was stressed by Adler. He doesn't deny, but further Jung tries to establish his important ideas. He said, he opined that that my theory is not just limited to these two aspects, because the individual who has come on this earth has the highest noble goals, noble ideals, which is just a step ahead. Let us see further through these slides. This is the picture of Jung. Freud talks of sex and Adler of status seeking. There is no dearth of examples. We find men sexually satisfied fully and having good standing in society. Yet they feel restless and disturbed, that is in search of inner peace. According to Jung, life itself is an ever-living fire, and self-realization is the aim of life, which is far beyond satisfaction of sex and seeking of an easy chair, high prestigious job. Jung does not deny importance of sex and status, but he doesn't limit his theory up to these only. He often seems to attack Freudian concept of sexuality. He lays stress on certain clear-cut aim of life before individual. He believed, how can there be law and order in this outer world so long as man doesn't feel at home in the inner world in his own soul? Because if one is not comfortable in the inner world and one is not disciplined in the inner side of his soul or her soul, then one is not expected to establish the real peace in the outer world. Because further I will be talking about the conscious and unconscious aspect of our life, that there should be harmony in both the aspects. So Jung wanted to say that there must be recognize the inner peace and its importance. Only then we can bring the inner peace in the outer peace in the world. And moreover, he wanted to make everyone realize that our attitude towards life must be a very responsive one, because our life is not meant for eating and enjoying only. One has to go ahead, to go beyond these things, eating and enjoying and having a good status. We have come on this earth for a higher purpose, so we have to search what is that higher purpose, which is that higher goal. So he wanted to make everyone aware that we have to realize, we have to find out the ultimate aim of life, what for we are on this earth, what for we are born. So he wanted to make everyone realize that one has to develop a responsible attitude towards life, and how one can live a responsible life. Only then we can bring the discipline in the inner soul, and then later on we can reflect it in our outer world. Then he talks about the structure of self. According to Jung, one's mind consists of following parts. First is the conscious mind, then personal unconscious, then collective unconscious. What is this conscious mind? The upper layer of one's mind consists of the memories, thoughts and feelings that result from one's consciousness. It is in fact the seat of one's ego and conscious behavior. It is only a fraction of the human mind. Below it lies one's vast unconscious, divided into two parts. First layer is the mind. There are different layers in the mind. First layer is the conscious mind, where our memories, our ideas, our goals, our aspirations, our desires, fulfilled or unfulfilled, they lie in that part, because it is just a fraction of mind, and it is a seat of ego. I must remind you that there are three parts, that is id, ego and superego. So ego just maintains, just try to make equilibrium, try to make balance in the mind. The ego, just id and superego, it wants to have the satisfaction or the pleasure all the time, and superego talks about the ideals and morals. But what does ego? Ego does the work of maintaining the balance or equilibrium between the id and superego, that is must in for the balanced growth of an individual. So below it lies one's vast unconscious, and that unconscious is divided into two parts. First is the personal unconscious. What is that? This layer of the mind concerning the personal unconscious lies beneath, but is very close contact with the conscious. It is highly individualistic and personal in nature. It contains all the repressed desires, feeling and emotions, our attitude, our interest, which might occur in the lifetime of an individual, because we dream so many things, we have so many ideas, goals, desires, but everyone is not so lucky that all the desires may come true. So our repressed desires, sometimes fulfilled and sometimes unfulfilled, they lie beneath this layer of the mind, that is the personal unconscious, which might occur in the lifetime of an individual. And the second layer is the collective unconscious. As the conscious layer is the upper one and below that personal unconscious, because it is just near to the conscious, so it touches those aspects also. Collective unconscious, beneath the layer of personal unconscious lies collective unconscious. This is neither personal and nor private, but universal to all individual. As I spoke to you right now, that personal conscious, unconscious is very much private and personal, but this layer, collective unconscious, is a universal content, and it is related to our all universal aspects. One's collective unconscious contains the experiences of the whole race gathered from ancestors. I will be talking about these archetypes because most of the beliefs, most of the ideas and the values we inherit from generation to generation, and some of the ideas, some of the concepts, some of the attitude we develop when we grow in the society, when we get education, and when we interact in the society with peer group, with the other adult stakeholders like parents, teachers, and the community's important person, great leaders, and we just go through the history of the great leaders. So we just develop or we just grow in the society with the interaction of the other persons in the society. So we just inherit most of the ideas from generation to generation, and these beliefs, they are our collective unconscious. Now, Jung does not deny the outer world, yet he gives importance to the inner world. He gives complete picture of the self with its various parts as well as outer and inner. According to Jung, the term self is for the integration of the various aspects of the personality. See, it is very important that our personality should be like a very integrated and harmonious one, because if there is no harmony, no balance in our inner and outer world, we will be a split personality. Personality develops when individual chooses his way and separates himself from the herd. See, let me elaborate this point. A man is known by the choices he or she does. We have so many options, and we have to choose one option out of the many options. From birth till death, from morning till evening, we have to choose, we have to select from various options, and the options we choose and the decisions we take, the judgment we pass on, they make us our personality. So my dear friends, my dear listeners and viewers, it is very important for everyone to choose the right things, because the power of discrimination, to choose between right and wrong, is very important. We as parents and we as teacher educators, we as teachers have to develop this discrimination power among the children, so that their self can choose what is right and what is wrong. What should I do in the welfare of myself, my community, my nation as a whole. So whatever decision, whatever choices one makes, that makes or mar his personality, because these are our decisions which an individual takes, and because our decision separates us from the herd, because we are not following the mob without thinking, without thinking. When we think what is right, and then we separate ourselves from the herd, and that makes or mars our personality. In his view, unconscious is not evolved out of the conscious, rather conscious is evolved out of the unconscious. All the differences which arose between Freud and Jung, or Freud and Adler, were mainly focused on the issue of conscious and unconscious, whereas Freud used to think that our unconscious is a storehouse of our depressed or repressed desires, but Jung thinks other way. He says the unconscious is the matrix out of which conscious has been evolved. Consciousness is the product of growth, whereas unconscious existed before the intellectual self began to function. our consciousness doesn't create itself, it arises from unknown depth. See how we behave, how we express our likings and dislikings, our ideas, our values. These values we inherit, they have been developed out of the unknown depth. From we do not know, sometimes we are not aware, but we have inherited those values, those ideas from our ancestors. The integrated person is one in whom the conscious and the unconscious work in complete harmony. See, this is very important. When I talk about inner world and outer world, that is the same thing. When conscious and unconscious, if the ideas which are lying in conscious and unconscious, they are not in harmony, there is a conflict, then the person will become an abnormal person, will behave like a neurotic person, because there is not balance in the ideas of an individual. So it is very important, it is really essential that there should be harmony in our ideas which are lying in our unconscious mind or our conscious mind. When on one hand Freud used to say that unconscious is evolved out of conscious, and Jung says that conscious is evolved out of unconscious, or call it a matrix. But the important thing is that there should be a harmony, because unconscious comes to a person in the form of dreams to help him by giving suggestions to unconscious realm of mind, is supplanted by the unconscious. I will be talking to you about dream. The ideas which were given by Freud, and how Jung differed from Freud on the aspects of dream. Whereas Freud used to say that through dreams, we are just reminded our past experiences, but Jung differs on this aspect of dream. Jung opines that sometimes these dreams, they are in a way prophetic or anticipatory, meaning by in dreams, through the simile or through the parables, one comes to know that how it is going to be happen. Later on I will be talking to you that for this the interpreter who interprets the dream must be an intelligent person, because that solution of the problems, maybe of the present problems or the future problem, do not come to us in our dream directly. One has to interpret in a very intelligent manner. So interpreter should be very intelligent one. So unconscious realm of mind is supplanted by the unconscious. Now structure of personality is like conscious ego, personal unconscious, complexes, collective unconscious, archetypes, anima and animus. I will be talking to you about these archetypes. Classification of unconscious. The issue was of conscious and unconscious, which is important. All the ideologies, all the values and all the differences which arose between these three psychologists were about conscious and unconscious and its role. So classification of unconscious can be given by dividing them in two parts. First is the primary or racial unconscious, and the other one is the personal unconscious. See, what do we mean by primary or racial unconscious? It contains primitive beliefs and modes of response handed down over centuries. These ancient ways of thinking are called archetypes. See, most of the beliefs, ideas, interest or the values or the attitudes, they are just inherited from generation to generation, from ancestors to the other generation, to the youngsters. So when these ideas are transmitted from generation to generation, we call them archetypes, because suppose one is having a belief about any aspect, then even after getting new information, new knowledge, one is having some part or of that beliefs which have been generated or inherited from the ancestors. So this is what we mean by primary and racial unconscious. And the second part is Personal unconscious, see what is it? It is formed with the unnoticed, or forgotten or repressed incidents of each person's life. See, so many things we remember and so many things we forget. So these forgotten or repressed incidents or feelings or the persons or the faces, they just slip into the unconscious. We do not forget it totally. Some of the things we may forget, but some of the things, they just slip into the unconscious. And when we are reminded of some similar things, some similar persons, some incidents, and we are reminded of those things, each person's life. So on this aspect, he agrees with Freud. He was not totally opposite to the ideas of Freud. Somewhere he agrees on this aspect, he agrees to Freud. The unconscious of an individual is the direct opposite of the conscious. Conscious and unconscious, the ideas at both the levels, they are opposite, but they are evolved out of each other and is complementary to it. How they are complementary? Because if there is no balance and no harmony between the ideas and beliefs of conscious and unconscious, then person will behave like a neurotic or abnormal person and cannot adjust in the society and even sometime to himself or herself, because all the time that person is frustrated, because a frustrated person cannot spread the fragrance of happiness and calmness in the society. So first of all, if we want to make the other person happy and comfortable, we have to be comfortable, we have to remain happy in our inner world, because there must be harmony of the ideas at conscious level and unconscious level. So unconscious try to correct and moderate the conscious, because Jung has said that it is like a matrix of our ideas. So sometimes this unconscious corrects and moderates our ideas, because in the previous series when I talked to you about the Freud's personality of theory, I spoke to you that he feels that there is no slip of tongue, because why we say something maybe bad, something maybe in anger, that is not a slip of tongue, that is not a slip of pen, but in our unconscious somewhere we wanted to say that very thing, and when we are in anger, the outburst of those words came out. So that was there. So sometime or most of the time, according to Jung, that our unconscious tries to moderate or correct the conscious one. And now the concept of unconscious in 6 types, like archetypes, symbols, libido, shadow, persona and soul images. And out of this, libido was very controversial, because the Simon Freud, the great psychologist who is considered a father of psychology, was criticized by his contemporary and his associates on the concept of libido. I will be talking about on it. First, I'll talk about archetypes. See this picture of the outer world: ego, self, shadow, conscious and unconscious. Further, first I'll talk about archetypes. What is archetypes? Archetypes are ancient ways of thinking and symbols are figures. As just now I spoke to you that some of the beliefs, some of the ideals, some of the interest, some of the attitude we inherit from our parents, from our ancestors, and these are transmitted from generation to generation. So these ways of thinking are called archetypes. Symbols are generally based on experience of the individual, but the experience of the individual is the experience of the human race. The collective unconscious is the all-controlling deposit of ancestral experiences from untold millions of years, from millions and million years, because they are being transmitted from generation to generation, and sometimes that modification on by each generation are made. So sometimes the ideas are being moderated from each generation, but there are slight changes, and sometimes they are transmitted like our cultures, our customs, modes and modes. they are transmitted from generation. These experiences are archetypes, and the second is the symbols. What are these symbols? Symbols are necessary openings to understand the human experiences, and they serve to reveal the depth of the soul, because Jung tries to find what is deep there in the soul, so tries to give the strategies and methods how one can understand those experiences which are lying deeper in the soul. Symbols are created by deep unconscious and found all over the world. Symbols, how do symbols appear? They appear in dreams, in art production, visions and fantasies. Sometimes one individual see the flowers and gardens in the dreams. Sometimes one individual see the horror or the horror pictures or the animals in the dream. So out of these simile, interpreter tries to, or the parables tries to interpret, if you saw the flowers or the garden or the good things or the lake or the water or the fire, how they can be interpreted. So it depends on our logical interpretation also. So these, an archetypal thinking gets expression through these symbols, because when I will be talking about dreams, in dreams we do not get the direct answers, direct solution, but we try to understand then the libido. He means by the term a life energy underlying all natural phenomena, including the human psyche. For Jung, libido is life itself, with the individual gaining maturity. It may follow different channels. One can turn writer, poet and so on as needed by him in his struggle for self and self-actualization. Libido may flow both ways, inward or outward. The person in whom life energy flows inward are termed as introvert, in whom it flows outward are termed as extrovert. Jung associated a person's introvert or extrovert orientation with four main behavioral functions, namely thinking, feeling, sensation and intuition. We can see in this picture Jungian types that thinking, sensation, intuition and feeling. So this was all about the three aspects given by Jung. Rest of the parts, rest of the things, I hope what the Jung said about the libido and conscious and unconscious and archetypal and the conscious and unconscious, the listeners and viewers must have been benefited, and they must be agreeing about the views given by Jung when he says that life is not meant for pleasure seeking only, life is not meant for status seeking or the high prestigious job, but life is meant far beyond of these things, that is the self-realization or self-actualization, which is the real aim of life. And the history is full of examples of such person who went far beyond in search of inner peace and true love. I hope it is beneficial for the listeners to understand the Jung's theory of personality. Thank you. Good afternoon, viewers and listeners. In this session today, we will be talking about the unconscious aspect given by Jung regarding the theory of personality and how he was criticized by his contemporary and what is the greatest contribution and merits or educational implications of the theory given by Jung. Let us talk about first the other part of the unconscious, which we talk about shadow. Shadow represents the unconscious. Our shadow are intimately related to us as the dark reflection of our conscious efforts. The shadow may become monstrous, may actually overwhelm the ego conscious. It refers to the Jung psychology of opposites. In a sense, the shadow is a highly personal creation, the dark side of our specific personality trends. In another sense, it reflects the universals of human experience and is personal only insofar as each individual drains differently upon the primitive human within all personalities. Further, he talks about persona. Persona represents the face we show to the world. It is adaptively organized image of the self which all of us form in the course of living. Persona is formed consciously as we develop our goals and ideas. It is necessity for living. Extrovert can change their persona as they change their dress. So it may differ at different times, places and persons. Identification with persona is disastrous. And the last one is the soul image. The soul image, anima and animus, lies deeper in racial unconscious. Every woman has her animus, the male component, and the anima includes archetypal images of women. The eternal mother, the virgin, the harlot, the witch, the temptress, the spiritual guide like Dante's Beatrice. Through this, Jung wanted to tell that a woman has to play so many roles, so she's like a pious and she has to play so many roles, and talks about the persona which any individual change. The extrovert change their persona as they change their dress. Now, a comparative view of introversion and extroversion in the four types: role of religion, creative living, neurosis and dreams. What is the role of religion? To Freud, religion is an illusion, mass delusion and universal neurosis. It is negation of sex and id. Jung says that religion is a need. Morality is determined by genes, that is, man is born good. Religion affects the integration of personality. Morality is deep-seated in the racial unconscious. On this concept of religion, Freud and Jung both differed. Freud used to say that religion is negation of id and sex, whereas Jung wanted to establish his ideas that religion is an important aspect. Then what do we think about creative living? According to Jung, creative work grows out of unconscious depth. The artist is the mouthpiece of the secret of the psyche of his time. He believes himself to be speaking out of himself, but the spirit of the age speaks through him. Genius forces its way through all odds. Every creative man is born with a divine spark. Jung wanted to say that every individual who is creative is having a divine spark, and through this one tries to establish the goodness or welfare of the society, whereas Freud totally against the creative aspect. He does not talk about the creativity. Then neurosis. These neuroses and dreams, these are very debatable, controversial, so one has to understand them properly. According to Jung, neurosis represents regression or going back as a result of serious obstacle in the flow of libido or imbalanced created in the mind through disharmony between one's conscious and unconscious. The concept of libido was very controversial, because the Freud, the greatest father of the psychology, greatest psychologist, was criticized by his contemporary on the aspect of libido, and Jung deferred his ideas on libido, and he criticized Freud, who called him a beloved son. But even then he criticized and he deferred his ideas on this aspect. That's why he established a different school of psychology, which we are talking about, analytical psychology. So the causes of neurosis do not lie in the past but in the present, and they talk about future, whereas Freud used to say that our causes, they lie in the past, and that's why he talks that our dreams remind us about the past experiences. But Jung differed on this aspect. He said that they are not always regarding the past, rather present, as a neurosis represents loss of self-confidence on account of one's inability to cope with the demands of the present environment. When one is not able to cope well with the present demand of the society, then this neurotic behavior takes place on the part of the individual. There is a serious conflict between one's conscious and unconscious. The inner self gets imbalanced, and what happens when there is a imbalance, or when there is a conflict between the inner world and the outer world of the individual, conscious or unconscious of the individual, then personality splits into a unintegrated personality, and the balance of the personality is spoiled, and when the personality is split, then the person start behaving like an abnormal person. His behavior becomes neurotic and all the time tries to just establish the conflict or the arguments with the other person, because he or she himself or herself is not a normal person, and turn into a neurotic behavior, because the integration of the personality spoils and the personality split into an abnormal personality. Then dreams. Jung agrees with Freud in saying that dreams originate from one's unconscious, but does not consider them as mere representation of past. Jung agrees with the Freud when talks about the dreams, but whereas Freud used to say that in dreams we are reminded of our past experiences, but Jung says that they are not mere representation of past experiences. They talk about the present problems and they give solution to those problems, but they do not give the direct answer in the dreams. They come in the form of simile and parables, and the interpreter has to be very intelligent. One's dreams are not thus merely a means of unreal wish fulfillment. Sometimes we generally say that whatever see in our dreams, they are our repressed desire and unfulfilled dreams. No, sometimes we get the solution of the present problems, and one conscious mind to meet its day-to-day difficulties and planning wisely in anticipation of one's future. If one can interpret and can understand the dreams intelligently, then can try to understand what can be the future solution of my present problems. Dreams can be anticipatory or prophetic. A dream never expresses itself in a logically abstract way, but always in the language of parable and simile. Now, let us try to compare Jung with Freud. According to Freud, unconscious is evolved out of conscious, and Jung says that conscious has been evolved out of the unconscious. Freud calls religion a universal neurosis, whereas Jung accepts it as a great treasure which provides with source of life. Whereas Freud used to think that religion is the negation of id and sex. On the other hand, Jung accepts religion that sometimes it can moderate the personality of an individual. According to Freud, life and death are two instincts, and life is circuitous to death. Jung thinks very important for everyone to understand. See how visionary Jung was when in his lifetime, which was 1875 to 1961, he was visionary. He said that in the second phase of life, one has to accept that I am moving towards death, and one should be ready to accept the old days and death, and one should be prepared for it rather than stay frustrated, and rather than worry of old days, rather one should try to accept. Freud does not give importance to creativity, whereas Jung opines that through creative work, unconscious expresses itself. Freud opines that our repressed desires seek satisfaction in dreams, but Jung opines that dreams give solution to our problems. Freud considers neurosis a disease, but Jung says that sometime when one turns neurotic, one gets time to talk to himself or herself. It is very important when one talks to himself, because in that process one gets the answers of the difficult situation. Freud takes libido as sex and stresses on sex satisfaction only. Jung realizes, and Jung retains the term libido. He does not say that that nothing like this libido, but he tries to mold its direction by calling it a life force which expresses itself in different ways, accepts the libido, but tries to mold it, that one tries to express this life instincts, life energy in different ways. Freud believed that childhood experiences are very important and they determine our personality, but on the other hand, Jung said, of course, Jung accepted the childhood experiences, but he opined that these are not only the childhood experiences who makes or who determines our personality. Rather, Jung talks about the attitude, that our attitude, our philosophy of life can change our personality, because these are our attitude also. Of course, he accepts the childhood experiences, but he talks कि later on, when we grow in the society and when we get education, when we interact with the intelligent persons, one changes his or her attitude, and these attitude or the how one looks at the life can change his personality. According to Freud, there are only two goals of life, that is satisfaction and back to the inorganic state, whereas according to Jung, the greatest goal of life is self-realization and self-propagation, because most of the time Jung has been talking about that one individual has not taken birth on this earth only for enjoying and only for pleasure seeking or status seeking. Rather, he goes beyond these aspects, that self-realization, one has to find the inner peace, that is for welfare of the society. Then Jung seems more interested in individual differences and Freud is more interested in universal dynamics. See, these days we are talking about individual differences, that as a teacher we has to recognize the individual differences. So again I'll say that Jung was so visionary at that time. He realized the importance of individual differences. Jung transcends Freud and Adler and recognizes in most of the concepts that they are also correct to some extent, but Freud and Adler on the other hand are exclusive. I'll say, if we compare all the three psychologists, Freud is an abnormal child and Jung a creative child and Adler a normal child. In therapy, Freud believes in free association, but Jung believes in controlled association. Freud approach is best suited for a neurotic child, and free association and cathartic output of pent-up emotions. Freud used to say that catharsis is important because our repressed desires are lying in our unconscious mind, so it is essential to give outlet or to those pent-up emotion, and Freud named this expression outlet of pent-up emotions as catharsis. And Adler's approach is best suited for a normal child through a probe into his lifestyle and giving him opportunity to express his best talent. Jung's approach is best suited for a creative child through provision of harmonious atmosphere where the racial unconscious may express its archetypes through him. I talked to you that the ancestral thinking or the values when transmitted to or inherited from generation to generation, we call them archetypes. So Jung's approach is best suited for a creative child when we try to give the provision or taking in mind the individual differences. See in this picture how we can compare the assumption Jung and Freud. First, on the basis of nature and purpose of the libido, a generalized source of psychic energy motivating a range of behaviors, and Freud, a source of psychic energy specific to sexual gratification. The nature of the conscious, Freud says that the unconscious is the storehouse of the repressed desires, but on the other hand, Jung says that unconscious corrects our conscious, then cause of behavior. Freud says that the past experiences or childhood experiences make our personality, but Jung says that not only the past experiences but the present attitude towards our life and philosophy of life also determine our personality. Then I'll talk about how the contemporary psychologists just criticized, or we can say they were differed, they were having different ideology than Jung. How they were saying, they were of the opinion that Jung seemed to be a mystique rather than a realist. Critics say that it is very difficult to understand the self and mind and very difficult to prove scientifically, but we can reply on this criticism that mind is a matter of experience. We cannot give the scientific approach of dissection and analysis to the realm of mind. Mind is only a matter of insight and experiences. So how can we try to prove or analyze with a scientific approach as the critics used to comment on Jung's philosophy? Furthermore, many of the things said by Jung in confirmation of the attitude to the universe and psyche seem to be unprovable in metaphysics and mysticism. That is his explanation of the dreams with reference to mythologies. There is nothing given to determine the correctness of his concept of the unconscious, helping the individual in dreams and supplanting the conscious. Moreover, he was also criticized his interpretation of dreams and dream symbols is more subject to the whims and fancies of the interpreter than in the Freudian school. Let me elaborate it. When Jung used to say that in dream we do not have our past experiences, rather in the form of parable or in the form of simile, we get the reply or the solution of our present problems in the futuristic terms. So critics used to comment on it. Sometime if the interpreter is not intelligent enough and those interpretation may be wrong, it may spoil the personality of the individual. So on this basis that the interpreter may be individualistic, the Jung was criticized. In spite of certain mystic elements, Jung's theory of analytical psychology is of immense philosophical value. Sometimes he was criticized that he seemed to be a philosopher, not a psychologist, because very deep into the deep of the soul, he tries to go there and try to explain what the individual is thinking, because he was talking about individual differences. So when he talks like this, his critics used to say that he seemed to be a philosopher, not a psychologist. But these points of criticism are very few. He has given a great contribution and we have great educational implications by the theory of personality given by Jung. We'll see. the therapeutic value of Jung's theory before educational implications, we see how the therapy can be given, how it has a value. According to Jung, if dreams are rightly understood, they lead to the clues to the inner world. Because again I am comparing Jung with the Freud. Jung says that it is not the past experiences, past memories, not the repressed desires all the time, rather we get solution in our dream. Dream supplies what is lacking. So through dream, what is lacking? Sometime a student is preparing for examination, and if he dreams that I am not getting good marks, oh this happened, so that clue can be given to the student by a logical or intelligent interpreter that this point, this subject is lacking in you, and for getting good achievement, good marks, you have to further work hard in this area. Jung does not stress about the sufferings of the past of a patient, but what is the present duty or task he is avoiding. He is stressing on this, that we have to realize how and where the individual is avoiding the present duty. What is the cause of his regression to past taking experiences? See, try to understand it. Jung wanted to establish if one remains or going deep into the back in the memories, it means something lacking in the present. That's why all the time he is or she is going back to the past memories. So what is the cause? After finding out that cause, Jung wanted to give the treatment by his own therapy, by his own thinking. Jung properly regards the theories of Freud and Adler as basis for treatment and not as philosophy. He does not totally condemn the great psychologist Freud, but somewhere he had a different views. He says that if I follow Freud and Adler, their thinking can be used, their ideas can be used for treating a neurotic person, not as a philosophy. Unlike them, Jung gives due importance to individual differences. He opines that the psychiatrist must decide whether a given child is maladjusted because his desires for superiority is thwarted or because his sex desires have been frustrated. See, when Jung says that when we have to start to find out or just suggest the strategy for treating any child or guiding or counseling any child, first of all we will have to decide, we will have to go deep into his or her case study, what kind of child he or she is, how and where and due to which aspects the child is maladjusted in the society. Why? Whether his desires have been thwarted from the society, or he is lacking in some area, or he is just being bullied by the peer pressure or the economic status or the social status or the ill treatment of in the institution or in the society on other basis. So first we have to find out the causes. Then let us in the end discuss the educational implication after knowing the aspects of conscious or unconscious or neurotic or the dreams or the experiences of or the inner world and outer world. We have to know and we have to understand how the great psychologist Jung has given the contribution in the field of education, that is, it has provided more meaning and value to human life by advocating self-actualization as its ultimate goal rather than mere sex satisfaction, sex gratification or power seeking as advocated by Freud and Adler respectively, because one has higher aims, higher goals and ideas in life. He gave a new dimension to the realism of the unconscious by advertising the existence of the collective or social unconscious. Our behavior to a great extent is not merely dominated by own desires and wishes resting in our unconscious, but by the silent impressions or impact of all our thinking and feelings rooted in the culture of our particular race and humanity in general. And lastly, he gave suggestion that teacher and parents should create proper environment for the child. As he recognized the individual differences, it is a suggestion for the teacher and the parents that if we want the balanced growth and personality of the individual child, we have to give proper environment to the child, need to help in free expression, and if we want that creativity should come out, then we need to give free expression and there should be no rigid discipline. Teacher also should be mentally healthy. Jung gives importance to creativity. Child should be treated as individual, and school should provide a sense of security to each child. In second phase of life, one has to make oneself ready for old age. As Freud talked about the life and death instincts, he differed somewhere and he just gave suggestions to everyone that in the second phase of life one has to accept the old age and that we are moving towards the second phase. There should be provision for maximum opportunity for the development of self in complete harmony with the development of society. And there should be emotional security at home, importance of religion to realize peace and calmness. Proper education should be given to allow maturity at proper age is important. Children should be guided not to drift towards extreme extroversion or introversion, to help the children to seek the ultimate aim of man's life, that is the self-realization and self-actualization. This is very important to understand for everyone, that we have to guide our youngsters, our children, that we are not supposed to move towards any extreme because that will be spoiling the personality. Jung's system contributed the word association test as one of the methods to discover personality traits of the individual. So I hope the listeners and viewers must be benefited by this talk about the Jung's personality theory, how he differed with the great psychologist Freud, and how visionary he was when he gave the word association test and other dream therapy, that we can get the solution of our present problem in the prophetic type in our dreams. Thank you.
With this note, thank you, ma'am. Thank you so very much. And dear friends, once again, we had a very, very vivacious session on personality theory. If you have any question, then do write to us at info.cec@nic.in. We would be meeting again soon and would be discussing on more theories. Till then, take care. Goodbye. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you, Geetika ji. Thank you, listeners and viewers.